This is a genuinely human habit, whose traces run through our entire history. The ancient Egyptians knew how to astonish, from breathtaking funerary rituals to, rather bold methods of contraception. Geese and ducks. They were plucked and parboiled as if prepared for a feast. Their customs and beliefs will give you a mild cultural shock. Welcome to the strange and mesmerizing world of ancient Egypt. For the Egyptians, the pharaoh was not just a ruler. He was not an ordinary person, a nearly divine figure, closer to the gods than to his subjects. The desire to keep power within the family was eternal, but Egyptian kings went further than most dynasties. Marriages between brother and sister became a tool of politics. Why so? The gods Osiris and Isis were brother and sister, and also spouses. Pharaohs, proclaiming themselves living gods, reproduced the celestial model on earth. Plus, such a marriage kept land, wealth, and the throne in the same hands. But then, unexpectedly, in the Roman period, such unions were found not only among the elite. Among ordinary townspeople, brother-sister marriages became surprisingly widespread. Some researchers believe that, in a number of cases, it was not a matter of blood relation, but of adopting the husband into the wife's family, so that property would not run away from the household. Others are certain these were real marriages between close kin, a deliberate strategy to preserve wealth or culture, especially in the Greco-Egyptian milieu. Be that as it may, Rome and Egypt is a rare historical example where such unions were widespread precisely among commoners. The price, alas, was there. The most famous case is Tutankhamun, the son of a brother and sister. His remains show signs of genetic problems: clubfoot, cleft palate. And this is not an exception. Centuries of consanguineous marriages surely multiplied hereditary ailments in royal lines. Egypt is not alone here. From the Inca to European monarchies, many rulers married close relatives. The Spanish Habsburgs pushed the practice to the absurd. The last of them, Charles II, suffered severe physical and mental impairments, a layering of inbreeding generation after generation. And yet, the risks were ignored. For dynasties, the intimate arithmetic looked like this. Marriage within the clan equals control over power and resources. Weak heirs, just in case. Harems, concubines, many marriages. Chances of continuation of the line were increased by quantity. A dangerous bet, yes. But they played it for centuries. Surprised? Brace yourselves. What comes next is even stronger. Ancient contraception is something between ingenuity and an extreme experiment. 4,000 years ago, Egyptian women introduced into the body a mixture of dried crocodile dung and honey. Sounds like a dare to our instincts, right? But the logic was, the dried masses acted as a physical barrier to spermatozoa, and honey was an antimicrobial component, reducing the risk of infection. Sometimes crushed acacia leaves, a natural spermicide, were added to the mixture. Crude? Yes. But the basic idea of a diaphragm-like plug and altering the environment is recognizable even today. And not only Egypt performed wonders of creativity. The Talmud mentions sponges soaked in vinegar, both a barrier and a change in pH. In Greece and Rome, they tried everything, from lead with oil and honey to ghee and rock salt. Yes, yes, even elephant dung appears in the sources as a possible option. The use of toxic substances sounds frightening now, but at the time people grabbed any straw to avoid unwanted pregnancy. Dangerous methods? More than enough. Herbal infusions for preventing or terminating pregnancy could be lethally poisonous at the wrong dose. The belief in sneezing jumping high after the act existed too. Obviously, it did not work, but desperation is a strong motivator. There were also prototypes of IUDs. Objects made of metal or glass were inserted into the uterus. Painful? horribly. Effective? Sometimes, perhaps. Fast forward to modern times, and it does not get easier. Less than a century ago, Lysol was advertised as a contraceptive. Yes, a household cleaning solution, used internally. The result was chemical burns and severe complications. The turning point came in the 20th century when scientists noticed something fundamental. During pregnancy, ovulation ceases. Researchers, from Haberland and Stein to Gregory Pincus, followed this thread. In 1956, Pincus created the first pill, a revolution. For the first time in history, women had reliable, scientifically grounded control over fertility. Since then, the palette has expanded. Pills, patches, implants, and IUDs have transformed family planning. And scientists are already peeking into the future. Ultrasound as temporary male contraception, high doses of melatonin to suppress ovulation. The ideas sound futuristic, but the path from crocodile dung to high technology is one of the strangest and most captivating chapters in the history of medicine. But wait, the next turn is even more peculiar. Magic, the engine of the Egyptian world. Ancient Egypt lived on magic, not tricks and illusions, but literally the power that makes everything possible. The origin of life, the stability of cosmic order, the healing of the sick, the safe journey of the soul into the afterlife. Magic was in every day, and no one doubted that it worked. Take childbirth, for example. If a woman could not conceive for a long time, she would spend the night in a special temple chamber dedicated to the fertility god Bes, hoping for his involvement. Bes was not only the protector of mothers and children. His amulets were worn everywhere. His image was tattooed. His presence surrounded cradles, just in case, and for peace of mind. From birth to death, magic walked alongside, literally accompanying every step. At the center stood Heka, the god of magic. He was not just another name in the pantheon, but the very force that imbues the other gods with power. Without him, nothing functions. Heka had no temples and no priesthood. He was omnipresent, dissolved in everything. In ancient texts, he says that he existed before everything, even before the gods, the raw, primordial force of the universe. Religion and magic were not opposed. Temple priests performed rituals for Maat, cosmic order. But for personal help, health, protection, advice, people turned directly to magical practices. Magic was not a separate sphere, but a way to live. And in medicine, this is especially visible. Physicians were at once healers and magicians. Some were practitioners, others incantation specialists. Yet both combined ointments and poultices with spoken spells. The medical papyri provide not only recipes, but also formulas of addresses to deities. Temple houses of life were special departments where knowledge was collected, preserved, and developed. They were both schools and sanctuaries, anatomy alongside magic, not a conflict, but a union. The legendary Imhotep already understood then. Diseases can have natural causes. Yet he did not reject the role of the supernatural. And yes, such a synthesis shaped the worldview from infancy to burial. And the Egyptians also were obsessed with beauty, but it was more than just looking striking. It concerned health, protection, and even the afterlife. Men and women painted their eyes, lined their lips, and worked carefully with hair. And the set of products was diverse: practical ingredients, dangerous components, and enigmatic formulas. More than 4,000 years ago, they perfected the smoky eye. They ground malachite and galena to obtain black or dark gray coal, with which they generously outlined the eyes. This was not only fashion, it was believed that thus they received the protection of Horus and Ra. Interestingly, modern research indicates that lead compounds in their cosmetics could hinder eye infections, a paradox, poisonous, yet in some respects beneficial. Cosmetics were not limited to eyes. Women tinted their lips with ochre, their hands and nails with henna, and perfumes, oils, myrrh, cinnamon, costly blends, literally divine. Aroma was linked to beauty, fertility, and rebirth. Therefore, bottles of perfume and cosmetics were placed in tombs. Attractiveness was needed, even after death, for new birth. Hair was a separate passion. Tweezers, razors, and blood-based mixtures for depilation. Yes, it sounds harsh. But wigs were a love forever. Made of human hair or plant fibers, arranged with filigree care. Tiny braids, two-tier forms fixed with wax. Priests shaved their heads, both for cleanliness and for ritual purity. The nobility adorned wigs with gold rings. Accessories were also status. Cosmetic caskets of high rank, such as the box of the royal cupbearer Hapu under Pharaoh Amenhotep IV, are found in tombs. Cedar and ivory, recesses for vessels with ointments, mirrors, instruments. Self-care. Egyptian style was a serious affair even for the afterlife. Mirrors, by the way, were often made solar. The disc, like a mini sun, a symbol of creation and rebirth. The handles in the form of a papyrus stalk, the plant of fertility. And pigment palettes? They carved them from stone in the shapes of animals. Fish, antelopes, even copulating turtles. This was not a designer's whim. Each image had symbolism of regeneration, chaos, or the protection of gods. The Egyptians insisted beauty is not on the outside, but a bridge to the sacred. A strange but working pregnancy test. Here's where ancient medicine truly surprises, and remarkably, sometimes works. More than 3,000 years ago in Egypt, they used the following method. A woman urinated on 2 little bags of grain, one with barley, the other with wheat. If either sprouted, they considered her pregnant. If not, then not. They went further. If barley sprouted first, they expected a boy. If wheat, a girl. In the 1960s, scientists decided to test the ancient recipe. And, surprise, in roughly 70% of cases, the urine of pregnant women indeed stimulated sprouting, whereas in men and non-pregnant women it did not. You cannot determine the child's sex this way, but the very fact of pregnancy, the method could sometimes sense. The likely explanation is a high level of estrogens that accelerate seed growth. This was not a solitary Egyptian quirk. Similar tests appear in other cultures, and in the Middle Ages, urine prophets diagnosed pregnancy with all their heart. Sometimes they mixed it with wine. Sometimes they burned soaked rags and judged by the smell. Today it elicits a smile, but for centuries people took it seriously. Egyptian medical texts are in general much deeper than was long assumed. For example, kidney functions. It was thought that they did not understand, but the records indicate the opposite. They were among the first to describe them. And the influence of Egyptian medicine stretched through Greece and Rome into the Middle Ages. Its echo is heard for millennia. And the grain test had a frightening tenacity. Its versions appear in 17th century German folklore and in some regions of Asia Minor. According to reports, it still existed in the 1960s of the last century. More than 3,000 years for one simple experiment. Most ancient recipes are nonsense, but in this one, there was enough truth to survive the ages. Ready for something even more enigmatic? We move on to a topic that changes the view of the past. Elongated skulls and mysterious cones. Ancient Egypt is a land of secrets, and one of the strangest is the unusual head shape of Pharaoh Akhenaten and his family. In statues, the skulls look elongated. Many attribute this to the artistic manner of the Amarna period. But is it only style? Scientists have considered the options. Hydrocephalus? It usually leads to early death. That does not fit the facts. Froelich's syndrome? It renders a man infertile. That does not match the numerous children attributed to Akhenaten. Marfan syndrome? It gives long limbs and cranial peculiarities, but the same almost symmetrical deformations in the entire family? Again, no. Then, the hypothesis of artificial deformation. A baby's head is tightly bound to form an elongated shape. Such a practice is known worldwide. Egyptologists long rejected it for Amarna, but one observation makes one think. The French sculptor Elisabeth Danis, working from CT scans of Tutankhamun's skull, reconstructed his face and found not a long occiput, but small depressions on the crown and at the base, exactly where pressure from bindings would be expected. The skull of the enigmatic KV-55, likely Akhenaten himself, shows similar zones. If this is genetics, it is an incredible coincidence. If it is bandaging, everything becomes logical. And that is not all. In ancient depictions, people often wear strange cone-shaped objects on their heads. A symbol. Perfume cones made of aromatic fat melting in the sun? For a long time, only guesses. Until recent excavations at Amarna. In 2009, archaeologists found in the burial of a woman an object resting on her head, a perfect cone. A second burial, a second cone. Years of research confirmed. These objects existed. What for? Religious? Decorative? A mark of status? There is no answer. But now we know. These are not artistic halos, but real things that people actually wore. The Egyptians also adored animals, and not only as helpers. Many creatures were considered family, and at the same time a link to the gods. Cats? Undoubtedly favorites, under the patronage of Bastet. But alongside them, dogs, ibises, falcons, even baboons. They were not merely kept. They were attributed sanctity, lived at temples, accompanied people, and sometimes even served, yes, trained dogs, and even monkeys as assistants appear with guards. Beloved animals were mummified and buried beside their owners. We will meet in the duat. At times, more tragically, if the owner departed first and left no clear instructions, the pet could be put to death to be sent along. Harsh, but such was the value of the bond. A famous example is the priestess Matkare Mutemhet of the 21st dynasty. At her feet they found a tiny mummy. At first it was thought to be a child, but an X-ray in 1968 showed it was her little monkey. Dogs held a special place. They were hunters, guards, and friends. The Egyptian word close to wow by sound resembles a bark. Amusing, right? Dogs were given telling names. Brave, reliable, useless. Someone clearly had feelings. Families shaved their eyebrows as a sign of mourning for a dog, a noticeable token of grief. They believed that in the afterlife, dogs would run by their side again. Just as in life. The connection with Anubis, the jackal-headed god who guides souls, made dogs even more significant. Near his sanctuaries, entire dog necropolises have been found. Pharaohs adored their dogs as well. On the frescoes of Tutankhamun and Ramses the Great, hunting with hounds, the human-dog bond survived death. And of course, cats. They were deified, pampered, protected from rodents and evil spirits. The death of a cat meant mourning for the whole family, mummification, and burial. Archaeologists have discovered an enormous number of animal burials. In the catacombs of Saqqara, besides thousands of feline remains, more than 8 million dog skeletons were found, a grand necropolis of Anubis. Whether these were sacrifices or a cemetery of beloved companions remains an open question. But one thing is clear, the Egyptians' love for animals still amazes. The work of an ancient Egyptian embalmer was sacred and, to put it mildly, not for the faint of heart. and some clearly crossed boundaries. The Greek Herodotus writes that families did not hurry to hand over the bodies of women immediately, but left them to lie for a few days. The reason is grim. They feared indecency on the part of craftsmen. And if there was fear, it means cases did occur. The embalming technology itself is also deeply impressive. The first act was the removal of the brain, not with a scalpel, but with a hook inserted through the nose. They pierced the thin bony plate at the top of the nasal cavity, stirred up the brain matter, and extracted it in parts. The goal was to dry the body as much as possible, stop decomposition, and prepare the deceased for eternity. For the Egyptians, mummification was a sacred art, a pass into the afterlife. The richer the rite, the higher the status. And if a soldier's skull bore traces of transnasal brain removal, it meant he was buried with honor, a mixture of reverence and horror. Such was their path to immortality. But this story has an even more chilling chapter. Mummification lasted about 70 days and was a privilege of the elite, pharaohs, nobility, the wealthy. It was not just preserving the body, it was a chain of rituals, magic, and prayers. First, they removed the internal organs, except the heart. It was considered the seat of the soul. The brain was extracted through the nose. They tried not to damage the face. Then the body had to be dried. It was covered with natron, a special mixture of salts that drew out moisture. 40 days later, the emptied body was stuffed with linen and straw, restoring its form. The finale was wrapping, layer by layer, impregnation with resin, so that everything would last for centuries. The finished mummy was placed in a sarcophagus and sent on its way to Osiris. But the dead are preserved not only in Egypt. There are natural mummies created by cold and dryness. In the American Spirit Cave in Nevada, the oldest mummified body for North America was discovered. It is more than 10,000 years old. Nature preserved the person thanks to the nearly perfect air of the cave. In Europe, Ötzi, the man from the Alps, who lay in a glacier for more than 5,000 years, with traces of a mysterious murder. And long before Egypt, the Chinchorro in Chile were already making mummies, 7,000 years ago. Unlike the Egyptians, they mummified everyone, even infants and the unborn. They removed tissues, stuffed the bodies with plant material, and covered them with clay masks. Their technique is older than the Egyptian one by 2,000 years, and its complexity is astonishing. After a working day on the Nile, a bit of entertainment. The Egyptians loved board games, mayhen, dogs, and jackals, but the queen was Senet. The oldest version dates to roughly 3,500 years before the Common Era. A long board of 30 squares, pieces, and moves, determined by lots, throwing sticks or knuckle bones. We do not know the full rules, but one thing is clear. It was not just to kill time. In depictions, Queen Nefertari, the wife of Ramses II, plays Senet, and in Tutankhamun's tomb, personal boards were found. The game connected the world of humans and gods. Players sought the patronage of Ra, Thoth, Osiris. Therefore, Senet was placed in tombs as a guide to the afterlife. One of the brightest symbols of the Egyptian kingdom is the false beard. This is not about fashion, but about power, an attribute of the divine kingship worn by pharaohs. The tradition goes back to the turn of the 3rd millennium before the Common Era. Beards were made of gold, bronze, and precious materials and fastened with straps behind the ears. Why a beard? It linked the ruler with the gods, foremost with Osiris and Ra. By putting it on, the pharaoh declared, "I am not just a king, I am a living god." And this concerned not only men. Hatshepsut, a woman pharaoh, wore the same regalia, including the beard. to emphasize her legitimacy. The symbol was about power, not gender. Over time, the form changed, from a short one with a square end in the Old Kingdom to a long, braided one in the New. It was worn both at religious ceremonies and in funerary rites as a line of connection with the heavens. Ancient Egypt is about balancing the impossible between magic and craft, beauty and medicine, love for animals and ritual strictness, politics and genetics. Their world is strange, yet thought out. Their decisions sometimes frighten, but often inspire admiration. And here is the main question. If you were offered one day in Amarna in the time of Akhenaten, or an evening in Thebes under Hatshepsut, where would you go? And what would you take with you? Coal, a Bez amulet, or a Senate board? What do you think about the episode, and what thoughts do you have on this topic? Write comments, leave likes, and watch previous episodes on the Top Facts channel, which are insanely interesting as well. By the way, they have already appeared on your screen,